What is the grand narrative, in Yuval Noah Harari's words, the story that will cohere people together in this cultural renaissance? What is its central value? What should we call it? What do communities built around it look like?
Daniel, I want to tee you up to answer this question because one of my proudest moments was getting to organize a dinner between you and Yuval about 1.5 years ago, and would love to hear what you have to say.
I'll tell you the first thing that arises for me is any answer to this question will definitely be wrong. It'll be wrong, and the fact that someone answered it is itself wrong at the level of the how, independent of what the what is. We've got the new narrative. We're the ones who see, we're the ones who know. We've got the new narrative. You guys need to catch up and kind of get with it. That's not actually the way forward. There is a narrative. It's unifying. Everybody's going to buy into it. If you don't buy into it, there's something wrong with you, or we have to do something about you. Like, we know that story throughout history. We know the great religions doing it. We know the kind of patriotic identities doing it. So I don't think somebody figuring out the grand narrative and trying to utilize the tools of propaganda to get everybody on board is actually it. That's one of the self-destruct things happening, because as soon as you realize the power of that, then various people compete for who has the better narrative. And now you have narrative warfare. And then you find out that, just like with Facebook and Hostess or McDonald's, the narratives that succeed more are the ones that appeal to people's fear and their in-group identity and out-group fear and that kind of stuff. And so now the narrative warfare becomes a race to the bottom rather than a race to the top. And that's the world we're in. The narrative of the left is so obviously the right one, and the narrative of the right is so obviously the right one to the people that already have certain kinds of susceptibilities, and it requires straw manning the other side and requires making false equivalencies on your side. And the same with previous communist, capitalist, or liberal Soviet or whatever it is kinds of stories. So I'm much more interested in people having trans narrative capacity, the ability to live in someone else's narrative, see the world through that eyes, feel it, and feel the meaningfulness of it. Be like, yeah, I can actually, like, I would love to see someone who has very traditional values who could feel into an LGBTQ activist and be like, wow, I can actually feel how oppressive the world that I feel is right feels to them. I can feel how much they can't find themselves in it. I can feel how much their desire for self-expression and freedom and authenticity feels like the most profoundly meaningful thing. There's stuff in there that is real that I want for them, right? I can see that. I'd like for that activist to be able to feel into the other side and be like, wow, they're holding something that I held as oppressive as sacred. They're holding it as the willingness to sacrifice some things for other things, and a maturity and a responsibility that's willing to do that, aligned with a higher sense of what is meaningful and sacred that they feel loyalty to. They have the sense of loyalty that is different. I want people to be able to inhabit different values, different perspectives, and different narratives. And so it's not, here's the one narrative to unify them all. It's each of the narratives will be partial. A specific narrative will draw on cultural backgrounds. The new cultural renaissance won't be the same for Islam and China and India and African nations in the West. That would make no sense. It has to draw on their history, their values, their identity. Now, any cultural enlightenment, to be an enlightenment, has to have certain things in common. All the dialectics where there are values that seem to be in opposition, but that all matter, where if you hold them as in opposition, you hold one as partial, you try to make this one win, so now the other side is either oppressed or has to fight back and you stay in war. All the values have to be held together in synthesis. And you have to realize that there is a continuous tension of managing synthesis. So is it about the rights of the individual, or is it about the responsibilities of the individual to the collective? If you think of it as an or, you failed at this thing. It's not a cultural enlightenment yet. There is a pairing of rights and responsibilities. There's a pairing of freedoms and duties. There's a pairing of, are we saying that the society is made by individuals who are individual agents and actors. So we want to maximize individual freedom and agency so that people, because the more agentic the people are, the better the society will be. Or are we saying that actually individuals are conditioned by the environments they're born into? If you're born into Darfur versus born into Finland, you're going to have a very different life statistically. It's straightforwardly clear based on healthcare, nutrition, and education, and the things you're exposed to and the amount of violence you're exposed to. So if the individuals are actually conditioned by the collective, don't we want to prioritize making a collective that itself is actually conditioning the best individuals? Well, of course, the truth is that the individuals are influencing the whole's influencing the individuals. The health of the body is based on the health of its cells, but also unhealth at the level of the body as a whole makes it harder for individual cells within that system to be healthy. There's a recursive relationship between top-down and bottom-up dynamics in connected systems. So for a cultural enlightenment to actually be a cultural enlightenment, whether it is going to be a uniquely Islamic one or a uniquely Indian one or a uniquely Western one, it has to have a virtuous relationship between the development of the individual, their freedom, liberty, and their agency, and the development of the groups that they're part of and their integrity and coherence, where the integrity and coherence of the group is supporting the individual, the agency of the individual supporting the group, and a virtuous cycle between them. And you can fail on either side, right? And it's a chaos or oppression type failure on either side. So to be a cultural enlightenment, to be a narrative worth having at all, it has to be at the level of the synthesis of the partial values. Now, could we do that a lot of different ways? Like, are there going to be a lot of different aesthetics and cultural versions of that? And do we want that? Do we want the richness of that? Absolutely. So does that mean that we want people who can actually inhabit the different aesthetics? And it's like, can I appreciate really beautiful Victorian architecture? Yeah. Can I appreciate really beautiful Moroccan architecture? Yeah. Can I appreciate really beautiful Balinese art? Like, if it's done well, and like, that's just, I can't say anything's more beautiful. That's fucking beautiful, right? And so do I want all of art to be one thing? No. Do I want all of culture to be one thing? No. Do I want that it is all aligned with life thriving? And not just for that little group, but for everything, because all the groups affect each other so much because of the level of our tech and our globalization. Yes. So we don't want a narrative. We want trans-narrative capacity. And we want that all the narratives are good for the group and the group's relationship with the rest of the world, not just the rest of the human world, but also the rest of the living world. And that they operate at the level of dialectic. And then we actually want maximum diversity of them that has richness and people that are oriented to move across them.